All right. So again, quick recap. We're doing two things today. One, we're going to look at the Q1 Pearl Abyss numbers. So, Korean owner of CCP Games. And then we're going to look at the Pearl Abyss Iceland, which is essentially just CCP, yearly numbers for 2023, because those were all also released. Okay? What Bundesland are you from? I am, okay, first of all, I'm from Ostfriesland, all right, in Germany. So only Germans will know this, but in Germany, Ostfriesland is famous. But I live in Hamburg. But enough of the distractions now. You can tell I'm excited today. It's a good day. Q1 Pearl Abyss earnings. So we're going to jump right into here because just a quick recap. Pearl Abyss is essentially two large IPs that are currently featured in games. One is Black Desert and the other is EVE Online. Black Desert is much larger, globally speaking, from a revenue perspective than EVE Online is, but EVE Online is about, 15-20% of the overall pie. All right. Black Desert is basically a native IP for Pearl Abyss, and EVE Online they bought when they acquired CCP Games a few years back. All right. Now, first of all, operating revenue is just about flat over the last quarters here, as you can see here in Korean wons. If you look at what important things that they wanted to give us in the overview, we're going to ignore Black Desert Online because we don't really care about that all that much on this channel. We're going to look at EVE, and they say the 2024 development roadmap was released, which I guess it was. They were showing the quadrants again and what they're doing, and then EVE Vanguard playtest. Okay, this is geared towards investors, so they like to show new things coming out, new things that might be potentially bringing revenue in the future. Then new IP coming out, big thing, Project Awakening. We as EVE fans, we know about this. This is the survival game, the next EVE game in the EVE universe. Some of you might know it as the blockchain game, which we are not talking about anymore. Ironically, it says new IP, which is not. It's not a new IP. It's based on the EVE IP, but it's a new game in the EVE universe. So they are very proud of that because, again, for investors, this is a big deal, right? That a game is coming out. Then let's look at operating performance. So overall, as I said, revenue is quarter on quarter is pretty flat. If we look at it compared to year over year, it's also flat. If we look at the operating profit, they made a slight operating profit, which is an improvement from the last quarter. And overall, the net profit is quite significant, but that is from financial income rather than operating income. So most companies have, the operations, the day-to-day operations that they do, making video games, selling video games, monetizing video games. And then the other thing that they do is financial activities. So buying companies, selling companies, maybe buying smaller investments, buying assets, selling assets, etc., etc. So this just means that as a company they made a profit, but overall it's not great times. Okay, and if we look at the Pearl Abyss stock overall, this is the stock. If we look at it from in the last month, you can see that these results that I just showed were actually taken quite positively. So the stock rose about 10%. But if we look at it over the last 5 years, you can see that they used to be much higher, and since then they've basically been on a downward trajectory here, pretty consistently, because game companies and their investors, they make money when they develop new IP and they monetize new games that are coming out, because that is when game companies make a lot of money. So old games like Black Desert and EVE, at best they're going to break even, and over time maybe they make a profit here and there, but it's very difficult to make old games profitable, which we will see from the CCP numbers, the yearly numbers that we're going to cover later on the stream. All right, so this right here, these numbers aren't great, but they were better than expected. Mainly because last time they or on one or two occasions over the last year, they announced delays in their new game, which is Crimson Desert. All right, Crimson Desert here, right. I don't know if they mentioned it here, but this is it. Yeah, here. Crimson Desert is their new big game that they're working on. That was delayed over the last few quarters, a few times. But now there weren't additional delays, and they were more concrete about what they're doing. So that is no bad news, is good news in this case. And so overall, the increased stock price makes sense for Pearl Abyss. Now, let's look at the breakdown per revenue, because this is what's important. Here we are looking at the revenue breakdown for between EVE Online and Black Desert right here. So you can see that quarter over quarter, EVE Online revenue is down from about 20 billion Korean won to 18 billion Korean won. So that's down about 10%. If we look at it versus Q1 2023, then we're actually up. And yes, there's then currency differences, yada, yada, yada. But overall, you can say quarter over quarter, we're up, which is unsurprisingly because player numbers are up overall, even though we had a subscription price increase. But quarter over quarter, it is down. And this is not surprising either, because as you guys know, EVE Online moved to a model where they are releasing expansions again twice a year in Q4 and Q2. And so you would expect Q4 and Q2 to be the high revenue months, because that is when people come back to look at the new content, to resubscribe, etc., etc. So as Morningstar points out, if you're curious, 18 billion Korean won is about $13 million US. Thank you, Morningstar. We're going to see some of those numbers in US dollars in a second here. Now, overall, you can see here the significant difference for Pearl Abyss overall is that the Asia numbers are just much higher, and so this is non-Korea Asia. And so also the mobile revenue is up. So this indicates towards Black Desert mobile doing well in other countries in Asia outside of Korea. That's pretty specifically what is happening. The other numbers aren't really quite all that exciting. Not that much. Not that much happening. Labor numbers are up here. You can see that. They're up from 40 billion to 46 billion. But if you compare that quarter over quarter, the difference is not all that high. And so the rest of this, I'm not going to really address too much. You can see the number of employees is about the same quarter over quarter and year over year. What's happening in the future? For EVE, they're saying, new expansion pack coming in June, Equinox. We all know this. And new map for EVE Vanguard is the announcement. I don't know if I knew that. I don't know if you guys knew this, but I doubt it's news. All right. And then in terms of growth strategy, Project Awakening, again, a large-scale test in May. They are announcing this here. I think it's already been announced by CCP beforehand. But this is, if you're following that, game, this is a big deal, because certainly this game, whether you like it or not, this game is going to be a big deal. At least Pearl Abyss and CCP are going to hype this very much. And EVE Galaxy Conquest is currently, that's their 4X mobile game, and that's currently in soft launch. They're announcing more countries, etc., etc. So, yep. Crimson Desert marketing, whatever that means, but Crimson Desert, at least it wasn't delayed. Okay. That is Q1 2024 Pearl Abyss numbers. That's essentially the warm-up. And now we're going to move into the main event, which is the yearly 2023 numbers for CCP in Iceland, or as it is called, let's see, Perlabis Iceland EHF. If you guys follow my stream, you know that once a year we actually get specific CCP Games numbers, not Perlabis global numbers, but Perlabis Iceland, meaning CCP Games numbers released, because they have to file them for the tax authorities in Iceland. And so this is the only time a year we get very, very, very specific numbers on how CCP Games is doing. And so we're going to take a bit of time to go through this, and I'm going to use Crota's blog post to guide us through this. And I saw Crota in chat there, and I'm sure he's going to comment here and there if I'm missing things. I had about half an hour or so to go through this already, and so I'm going to show you the highlights, and then maybe on a later stream we're going to dive into more detail. Bruder Bellum, thank you for resubbing 12-month. Awesome. Thank you. All right. Let's jump in here. Again, this is Perlabis Iceland. So this is CCP Games and all of its subsidiaries. So don't get distracted by Iceland. This is also the other CCP locations in London and Shanghai, for example. And I'm going to jump straight into the statement of comprehensive income, because this is the most exciting part. And so first of all, let's look at game revenue. Okay, game revenue is essentially flat from 2022 to 2023. Now remember, 2023 was a big year. 2023 was a sub price increase. 2023 was quite successful expansions, etc., etc. But overall, if you look at game revenue from 2022 to 2023, it is essentially flat. So this is revenue that comes from subscriptions, from Plex sales, etc., etc. While you have to, I've mentioned this before, but you have to remember that some of these effects of spending money in EVE are deferred. So not all of them are immediately recognized as revenue as seen on this game revenue line right here. So if you buy a 12-month subscription with real cash for EVE Online, then CCP will only realize this revenue as you use it up month by month. So if you spend $100 on EVE Online in December, they will only count 1/12 of that for the 2023 numbers. So just keep that in mind while we go through these numbers. And Crota says, and revenues from NetEase in China. Yes, which is NetEase in China is essentially EVE Echoes. And is it? I think it's only EVE Echoes, right? Or is it also is it also the EVE revenue from Singularity for Serenity? Yes, not Singularity, Serenity. So overall revenue flat. Okay, so far so good, right? Yeah, Galaxy Conquest is probably not making cash yet. Next line I want to look at is the research and development. So research and development, we can see that there was a significant increase, over 10% in research and development. And basically, in terms of research and development, this is their biggest cost, because this is actually developing video games, right? This is either running your existing games and further developing your existing games, or developing new IP, and in this case, or new games under the same IP. And so some of this definitely will be Project Awakening, because that is where CCP is putting significant resources on right now to develop that game in various locations. So definitely that is something we see there. Publishing costs, down a little bit. Marketing costs up a little bit, but all not significant differences. General and administrative costs are up quite significantly. So their general general administrative costs could be, you know, management, could be probably is also HR, finance, etc., like those overall cross-functional functions. Crota says, if it goes to CCP Shanghai, then these accounts will consolidate it in. Yes. CCP Shanghai is 100% owned by CCP, which is 100% owned by Polybius Iceland. Yep. Now, we have some financial income and financial cost, but these essentially cancel each other out and come out to a similar result. So I'm not going to go into that. Exchange rate difference. This was a positive change this year. It was a negative change the last year. That is, you know, just the way it goes for companies that are operating outside of US dollars. You know, they have to report in ISK, but in Icelandic krona. But then again, they will make a lot of their revenue in euro or US dollars. So there's always a currency risk there. Yeah. US dollars. Okay. Oh, this is US dollars. Hold on. Which one did we have? There are some numbers here in Icelandic krona, but this is let me see here. US dollars. Okay. Yeah, 56 million. Of course. Yeah, that's got to be US dollars. Okay. So we're looking at US dollars here. So overall, if we're looking at the loss, then last year, you have to remember, last year we had something called an impairment loss of 50 million. So an impairment loss last year, and we talk about this, I have a video out there as well. This was a write down of assets. So essentially, if you as a company notice that you have an asset that is worth less than you thought it was on your books, then you have to write it down, right? You basically are taking the asset, you're saying this is worth 50 million less than we thought. And in terms of accounting practices, you have to recognize that as a loss. So the reason last year's loss by CCP was so large was because they wrote off, they had about, 17, 18 million operating loss anyway. So the operations of CCP Games were already negative last year. But on top of that, they wrote off 50 million because their assets, essentially their game, was worth less, and they wrote it down. Okay, so when you are, this is common practice, but this is a very, very significant part of what they did last year. So it was a huge deal. So far as, and you can see that significantly also in the Pearl Abyss numbers that they wrote that down. All right. This year they didn't have to do that because obviously they wrote it down last year, so they don't have to do that again. So the loss overall is much less than it was in the year before. Nevertheless, this loss is still quite significant. So if you're looking at CCP Games operations as they run right now, they were loss-making last year, and they are loss-making this year. Now, is this terrible or is this the end of the world? No. As I said earlier, game development companies, they typically make a lot of their money from new games. So when new games come out, the initial hype, that is when they will make most of their money. And then at some point, the game goes into, I know this is a bad word, but it goes into quote unquote maintenance mode. And it's very, very tough to make a lot of money from older games unless you're World of Warcraft, right? So for EVE Online, basically, they are developing, for CCP, they're developing things like Project Awakening that are costing a lot of money on this research and development line, but they're not making any money yet. So they're hoping that in the future, at some point, they're going to be making money with this. And the way they can finance this is because they have investors. So you guys all know that Andreessen Horowitz, A17, whatever the name is, A17N is the investment company. They gave CCP Games 40 million to develop Project Awakening. So they have a little bit of a buffer to invest that money and develop that game. A16Z, thank you, Spot. It's Andreessen Horowitz are a large investment company, basically a private equity firm. So, but yeah, as Kroda says, Pearl Abyss paid $226 million for CCP in 2018, but that investment, in essence, they had to write down a lot of that value that they paid back then, which is what we saw last year in that impairment charge up here, right? Because if you look at the Pearl Abyss numbers, that is essentially saying that they overpaid for CCP. Jesus, that nearly blew my head off. Okay. Now, so overall, CCP Games loss-making in a fairly similar dimension as they were last year if you take the 50 million charge out. Now, there's something else interesting going on here. Let's skip from the balance sheet straight to the statement of cash flows, because you would say, look, if you're losing 18 million, right, $18.8 million on the year, then you need cash from somewhere. Okay, that cash can come from your parent company, or you can get a loan out or whatever, but you need that cash, because otherwise, if you're losing 18 million, you're missing 18 million in cash. So if you look at the statement of cash flows that looks at how much cash does CCP Games have, then you're starting with the 18.8 million loss, okay? And then there are some things that you add, subtract. I'm not going to turn this into an accounting class, but essentially something like depreciation and amortization are non-cash expenses, right? So while on the income statement you're saying we're losing 9 million because our assets are depreciating, this does not really have an impact on your cash. So really, these 18 million, after you take effect all of this, is only 11 million in minus. So you're saying, if you're looking down here, they actually ended up with 25 million in cash plus. How did that happen? Well, look at this right here. Proceeds from the sale of intangible assets. Okay. CCP made $27.5 million from the sale of tokens. Now, these are definitely related to cryptocurrency. Okay. Kroda and I don't know if anyone out there knows specifically what CCP did there, but they generated 27.5 million in cash from the sale of cryptocurrency tokens. Now, we don't know who bought them. We don't know what they are, but I am going to guess that this definitely has to do with Project Awakening. It would be surprising if it's not. But somehow they're saying, hey, we minted tokens, we sold them, somebody bought them. I don't know if they're NFTs. I don't know what they have to what this has to do with, but they were able to come out cash positive because of this. Otherwise, they would have been significantly cash negative. So yeah, this is very, very, very interesting. The 20.7 is also sitting in deferred income, so not in the profits. Correct. Yeah. Which line are we seeing this on? Right here. So proceeds from sale of intangible assets, 27.5 million. Unrecognized revenue. Yes. Revenue that they are expecting in the future. Yeah, so we don't know. We don't know what they are. Let's see. Did I miss something on the balance sheet? So essentially, to wrap it up, 18.8 million loss, but cash positive because of token sales. On the balance sheet, I don't think, Kroda, we have anything super interesting on the balance sheet. Except for maybe the deferred revenue. Yeah, deferred revenue. So deferred revenue. This is the Plex and Omega that has been bought but hasn't turned into actual revenue. but it will for sure. And so that has increased from 6.6 million last year to 8.5 million now. This is not surprising. CCP raised the subscription price, and so a lot of people turn to longer term subscriptions to achieve the same average subscription price. And so a lot more people are buying long term subscriptions, and so the deferred revenue number is going up. This is not surprising at all. Now, they borrowing related, they do have a 50 million loan, $50 million loan that they paid back, but then immediately re-borrowed. And I know we see that somewhere later who they borrowed it from, but until I find that, that's going to take a while. Was it the Korean Development Bank? They paid it back and then immediately borrowed it again from someone else. Morningstar US, thank you so much for gifting 5 community subs. Appreciate it, dude. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Now, let me see if we find that somewhere. I don't know if you, let's see. Do you remember Croda? The new 50 million loan is from Perlibis. Okay, so they paid back the Korean Development Bank and then re-borrowed from Perlibis for 2 years. Yeah. Who knew that I'd be learning accounting from watching a gaming stream? Yeah, this is, I mean, welcome to my stream, man. This is what we do. So, yeah, most likely with less interest rate, definitely with less interest rate. They actually went from, what was it, 4.5% to 3% or something like that. They were able to save some interest expense on this. So if I go through, okay, 5.2 to 4.6% is what Corda says. Yep. Yeah. And then an idea to look at the revenue analysis, which shows that EVE Online revenues actually rose. An idea to look at the revenue analysis. Do we have revenue analysis? Do you know what page it's on, Rhoda? Is the loan the reason the retained revenue is down so much? No, the loan shouldn't have an effect on that. Page 20. Okay. This one right here? Okay. Yep. Okay, perfect. This is it. I'm going to actually make this a little larger so you can see. So revenue from subscriptions and in-game sales is up from 47.1 to 48 million, which is, you know, is significant, I would say. You know, it's not 10%, but what is that about? You know, maybe 3-4%. You know, royalty and licenses are down 1.7%, 1.7 million, and this is the NetEase portion, right? So this is the China portion. So this is probably related to EVE Echoes or China revenue. So essentially, we have a we have the part that is not run by NetEase is doing better than last year, and the part run by NetEase is doing worse. Essentially, is what I would say. Yeah, EVE revenue is rising versus China falling. Yep, albeit slightly. So my expectations would have been probably that 2023 was a little bit better than this for EVE, because the player numbers were up significantly, but it looks like overall it's doing okay. You have to remember, this is a 21-year-old game. So for a 21-year-old game to be increasing revenue year over year is still a great feat. Right? This is the look at revenue by region. So we can see that North America is about flat. Europe increased quite significantly. from 14 to 14.7 or almost 14.8 million. Player numbers would indicate that as well, right? We're seeing very, very strong EU numbers versus NA numbers, I think, right? Overall. Asia is down quite significantly, very significantly. And so, yeah, that makes sense. Salaries have gone up quite significantly. So, I mean, we saw a lot of inflation and wages also. So that's pretty significantly. It's pretty significant. Being in Iceland, this is unsurprisingly their biggest expense. The labor costs are very high in Iceland, as is everything else. So essentially, running a game company in Iceland is expensive. It's expensive because a lot of things are expensive in Iceland. So this is this is essentially a privilege that they're affording themselves. But it's also a reason why they have different locations as well. Although they seem to not be using it's not like they're going to other cheap locations, because London is really, really expensive as well, and so is Shanghai. But we know that they actually moved to a cheaper office space in London last year. We saw that from their financial statements. So they're being cost conscious, at least. Yeah. Obviously, they're they also received some government grants, which is other income that they're getting from the government. I think about 4 million. Yeah, I would also guess that the salary increases will also go into this year, though. At least that's what we're also seeing in Germany. I mean, the inflation last year leads to a lot of increases this year in salary. So I would think that there's a slight delay between inflation and salary increases, because inflation is used in negotiations 6 months later. Luckily, inflation is down a lot this year compared to last year. So hopefully that will even out at some point. Okay. Any questions, comments from you, Crota? Otherwise, I would wrap it up here. What do you think? Very interesting again. Love looking at these. Look at the balance sheet, the non-current liabilities. Here. $50 million from Pearl Abyss plus 37 million from somewhere else. Well, yeah. I mean, this is the 50 million that they borrowed now from Pearl Abyss rather than from the development bank, and 37.5 million in deferred revenue from the token sales. So, yes, they had to source 87.5 million US dollars that did not come from EVE Online. That's right. Yeah. I mean, it's fair to say that if it wasn't for Pearl Abyss buying CCP Games, the world would look very, very different, right? EVE Online is also still running because of Pearl Abyss, and I think people forget that sometimes, right? I mean, somebody has to. If you're making a loss, somebody has to foot that bill. Okay, you cannot run a loss-making company forever on your own. It's not going to happen. You're going to need investors. You're going to need, somebody taking that. So, 87.5 million in 1 year is quite significant. All right. Then, all right. Let me just wrap up the stream and we'll go from there.